thought about, you know those like prophecies in the Bible, and if they could actually be about people outside of like Christianity?
Oh, yeah.
Like today we're going to dive into one that's really fascinating. The idea that the prophet Muhammad might actually be mentioned in the Christian scriptures?
Yeah.
Pretty wild, right?
That's right. And this isn't just like some crazy idea that like one person came up with. The Quran, the main book in Islam, actually says that Muhammad was prophesied in the Torah and the Gospel.
Okay, so we're going to start our deep dive there. Our source material today is this YouTube video with Dr. Zakir Naik, and he looks at some Bible passages from a Muslim perspective.
Right.
So Dr. Naik points to Surah 7.157 and also Surah 61.6 in the Quran, and these verses are what make those claims.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Muslims believe these verses basically, they set the stage for understanding Muhammad's arrival, not as this like random thing, but as like a continuation of prophecies across all the Abrahamic religions.
Makes sense. So how does Dr. Naik like try to prove this?
Well, he focuses on this important figure that Jesus mentions in the Gospel of John, the Comforter.
Right, in John 14.16.
Yeah, you got it. It's where Jesus says he'll send a comforter who will be with believers forever. And traditionally, like a lot of Christians, they think this comforter is the Holy Spirit.
Okay, but then Dr. Naik throws in this like total curveball.
Yeah.
He says that that interpretation is wrong. He's like, no. The Holy Spirit was already around before and during Jesus' life.
Exactly.
So then if it's not the Holy Spirit who is this comforter.
Yeah, well, Dr. Naik does some really cool stuff with the language. He looks at the original Greek word Paraclete. And while it can be translated as comforter, it's got a much bigger meaning.
Right. It's kind of like how we use the word advocate. Like you can be someone's advocate in court, but you can also just be a strong supporter.
Exactly, you got it.
Yeah.
And Dr. Naik thinks that a better translation in this case might be parakletos. It's a word that's closer to meaning one who praises, or like worthy of praise.
Wait, I think I see where this is going. He's connecting this to the name Muhammad, because it can be interpreted as both the praised one and one who praises God.
You got it.
It's an interesting connection, even if it's maybe a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. It makes you wonder if the Comforter isn't the Holy Spirit, and if the language could mean something else, then who could it be? Dr. Naik uses another passage, John 16.7, to try to make his point even stronger.
Oh, yeah. This is the part where Jesus says that the Comforter can only come after he's gone.
Right.
Dr. Naik says this is super important because if the Holy Spirit was already there, then this verse has to be talking about someone completely new, someone who comes after Jesus.
It's pretty smart how he's using the Bible's own logic to make you see these verses in a new way. Like he's building this whole case piece by piece.
So then what does this mysterious comforter actually do?
Right. Well, in John 16.1 or 14, Jesus describes the Comforter as the Spirit of truth. He says that the Comforter will guide people to the truth and only speak what he hears from God and will also glorify Jesus.
And that's when Dr. Naik's argument really comes together. He says that those characteristics match up perfectly with the Prophet Muhammad. Seriously, I don't see it.
Well, think about it. Muhammad said that he got revelations directly from the angel Gabriel. And he always said that he was only repeating what God told him, not just speaking from his own ideas.
Okay, I guess I can see that parallel, but how does Muhammad fit the glorifying Jesus part? I mean, Muslims have a totally different view of Jesus than Christians do, right?
That's a really good question. It's important to understand what Muslims believe about Jesus. So while Muslims don't think Jesus was God, they have huge respect for him as a prophet of God. Actually, Jesus is mentioned in the Quran way more times than Muhammad.
So Muslims don't see Jesus as God, but they still believe he was a very important prophet.
Exactly. They believe in the virgin birth and all his miracles. They also believe he was the Messiah. The only difference is that they don't believe he was crucified or resurrected. They think God brought him up to heaven.
Okay, but how does that connect to the idea of glorifying Jesus?
Well, Dr. Naik says that Muslims glorify Jesus by recognizing that he was a prophet and that he had a miraculous birth and that God gave him the power to do miracles. He's saying that by respecting Jesus as a prophet, Muhammad was actually fulfilling that part of the prophecy.
It's definitely a different way of looking at it. I'm starting to see how he's connecting all these different things.
He's basically changing the whole story. Instead of seeing Islam and Christianity as totally separate, he's suggesting that maybe they're connected somehow, and that maybe Muhammad's coming was actually predicted in the Bible. Whether you agree or not, it's definitely something to think about.
It makes you wonder if there's way more to this story than we realize at first. But we're just getting started. There's so much more to explore here.
You're telling me. We've just scratched the surface. Dr. Naik's analysis really makes you think about how different religions might be connected and how we understand these ancient texts. And it shows you how important perspective is.
I'm ready for more. Let's keep digging and see where this deep dive takes us.
You know, it's really cool how Dr. Naik uses this idea of glorifying Jesus.
Yeah.
He's like, for Muslims, saying that Jesus was a prophet and that he was born miraculously, that's a way of glorifying him.
Right.
And that fits with what's in John 16:14.
I bet a lot of people don't realize that. We tend to think of different religions as being like totally against each other.
Right.
But Dr. Naik is pointing out that maybe they actually agree on some things.
Exactly. He's saying that maybe Muhammad coming to earth wasn't like contradicting what Christians believe, but actually like fulfilling some of their prophecies.
That's a really cool way to connect those two faiths.
Yeah, it is.
So, okay, let's go over what we've talked about so far.
Okay.
We started with what the Quran says about Muhammad being prophesied in the Torah and the Gospel.
Right.
And then we looked at those verses from John about the Comforter and the Spirit of Truth.
Yeah.
And Dr. Naik thinks those could be talking about Muhammad. He's using the language and the history and what Muslims believe to support that. It's like a puzzle. Like you have all these pieces from different places and you're trying to put them together to see if they make a picture.
Uh-huh.
But even with all those pieces, it still feels like there's so much we don't know.
That's what I love about these deep dives.
Me too.
We're not trying to tell anyone what to believe.
Right.
We just want to get people talking and thinking for themselves.
It's all about like looking at the source material and figuring out what you think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Asking questions. Challenging what you think you know.
And when you do that, you understand things better.
Totally.
Not just different religions, but also how people interpret old texts.
Yeah.
It reminds us that there's always something new to learn.
Yeah. Even from stories we think we already know.
Who knows what else we might find?
Oh, absolutely. Now, Dr. Naik mentions that he thinks there might be even more prophecies about Muhammad in the Bible, but he didn't have time to talk about all of them in the video.
Oh, man. Talk about a cliffhanger.
I know, right?
Like, what other parts of the Bible could be talking about Muhammad?
Yeah, what if they back up what Dr. Naik is saying? Or maybe they challenge it.
Yeah.
That's something we can keep looking into.
Definitely. This whole thing has been a great reminder that learning never really ends.
Right.
Like, there's always more to discover and think about and talk about.
Totally. And that's what I think makes studying religion and prophecy so fascinating.
Yeah.
You're always like questioning everything you thought you knew and trying to see things from different perspectives.
This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Like, do those verses in John actually point to Muhammad?
Right.
Could there be this like hidden connection between Islam and Christianity that we never even thought about before?
It really makes you think.
It does.
I mean, it's up to each person to decide what they believe.
Right.
There are a lot of different ways to interpret those passages.
Yeah.
And it's important to respect all those different views within Christianity.
But Dr. Naik is giving us a new way to look at those verses.
Right.
He's not saying that the traditional Christian interpretations are wrong.
Right.
He's just saying, hey, what if this is another way to understand it?
And maybe that opens up some new ideas.
Exactly. And that's what's so cool about these conversations between different religions.
Yeah.
It's not about trying to convince someone that your religion is the right one.
Right.
It's about like building connections and understanding each other better
Absolutely.
and seeing what we all have in common.
You know, I really encourage everyone listening to check out the sources for themselves.
Yeah.
Read those verses in the Quran that Dr. Naik talked about and go back and look at those passages in John.
Yeah.
And just see what you think. Like, what other interpretations can you come up with? What questions does it raise for you?
That's the whole point.
Yeah, this deep dive is just the beginning.
Totally.
We've only scratched the surface of this whole topic.
There's so much more out there to learn.
So keep searching and keep asking questions.
Yeah.
The learning never really stops.
And hey, maybe you'll discover something that we missed.
I'd love to hear about it if you do.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. So until next time, keep diving deep.
See you then.